In the 1960s, Henry Ford's second earnestly wished to have a Ford cross the finish line at Le Mans, and in 1963, it seemed his dream would come to fruition. He learned that Ferrari was willingly to sell to Ford Motor Company, and negotiations began between the companies which showed much promise. Then on May 22, 1963, a newswire revealed the sudden end of the deal. It read, "Ford Motor Company and Ferrari wish to indicate, with reference to recent reports of their negotiations toward a possible collaboration, that such negotiations have been suspended by mutual agreement." But it was far from a mutual agreement. Enzo Ferrari, the company's head, had pulled out of the deal out of spite. Spurred out of anger, Henry Ford II vowed to put a Ford in Le Mans, and 3 years later, the iconic Ford GT40 was born. In early 1963, an European intermediary informed Henry Ford II, grandson of Ford's founder and one of America's most influential industrialists, that Ferrari's head, Enzo Ferrari, was interested in selling to him. Ferrari were world leaders in the racing circuit, and Ford wanted to replicate their success. Talks between the companies began, and Ford spent millions of dollars in auditing Ferrari's assets and legal negotiations. However, when Enzo discovered that his company would not be allowed to race at the Indianapolis 300 because Ford could not tolerate the competition, he pulled out of the deal. Furious, Ford tasked his racing division with building a racing car that could beat Ferrari, and the high-performance and special models operation unit was created to accomplish this. The unit produced the initial design concepts for the GT40. British car manufacturer Lola was chosen to build the new model. A development team consisting of Lola's chief engineer Eric Broadley, Ford's engineer Roy Lunn, and ex-Aston Martin team manager John Mayer was formed. With the 1964 racing season approaching, they had 10 months to build a trophy-winning model. The project began at Broadley's garage in Bromley, before moving to Slough, near Heathrow Airport. The Ford Advanced Vehicle Limited subsidiary was established to cater for the project with Mayer as manager. On April 1, 1964, the Ford GT101 was unveiled in England. In May, the GT40 raced at the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometers, but failed to cross the finish line due to suspension failure. At the 24 Hours of Le Mans, all three Ford GT40s lasted only 12 hours of the required 24 hours. The Ford GT40 was undoubtedly fast, but it failed woefully at endurance. After another dismal performance at the 1964 Nassau race, the project was moved back to the U.S., and Carroll Shelby was given Mayer's job. After securing first place and second place victories at the Daytona 2,000 kilometers and Sebring 12 hours respectively in 1965, the Mark II model would dominate the 1966 racing season. The creation of the Le Mans Committee was one of the first changes made for the 1966 racing season. Heads of several Ford divisions, Ford's NASCAR racing team Holman and Moody, and Carroll's Shelby American made up the committee. The diversified workforce of the Le Mans Committee cut through most of the red tape at Ford and gave them enough time and resources to develop the 427 GT40, which was christened Mark II. In 1966, Daytona was increased from 12 hours to 24 hours, and the Mark II finished first, second, and third. At the 1966 12 Hours of Sebring, GT40s clinched the three top finishes, and in June, at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the GT40 once again took the top three spots. By bringing the French classic home, Ford brought Le Mans to America's consciousness. In 1967, Ford entered the Mark IV, and once again won the Le Mans, and retired from the field afterwards. Henry had proved to Ferrari that if he couldn't be bought, then he could be beaten. The Mark I gave Ford its first victory at the 1965 Daytona. It was lightweight and fielded a 289 cubic inch engine, which helped it set speed records at 1995 Le Mans, but did meet the endurance test. The solution was the Mark II, a GT40 stuffed like Thanksgiving turkey, with a 7-liter 427 cubic inch V8. It was basically the same car as the Mark I Broadly conceived in 1963. It had a conventional layout for the GT racing cars at the time, with semi-monocoque chassis construction and a midship engine powering the rear wheels. However, the large V8 engine was unorthodox. Chief engineer Ray Lunn and his team were convinced the big torquer was the key to pushing the Mark II past its previous failures. But the new engine came with problems like power transmission and aerodynamic issues. Also, how could they stop a 2,800-pound machine moving at 200 miles per hour? Improvements were made such as the use of a dry pump, a new exhaust system and carburation, as well as engine weight reduction. The engine itself was the 7-liter FE engine used by Ford Galaxy in NASCAR racing. A new Carcraft-built 4-speed gearbox replaced the ZF 5-speed used in Mark I, 1968 Ford GT40 Mk1. The Mark I was the original GT40 and was powered by 4.2-liter 255 Cu in alloy V8 engines. 5 prototype models were originally built with roadster bodywork, and 2 more were built by Allen Man Racing in 1966. The model would win the Le Mans in 1968 and 1969 after modifications by JW Automotive. The new FIA rules that banned unlimited capacity engines made Mark III and Mark IV obsolete, giving the Mark I an opportunity to leave the shadow of the younger, bulkier models. X1 Roadster. The X1 Roadster model followed the Mark I and was built to contest the fall 1965 North American Pro Series, a forerunner of Can-Am. The car's features included an aluminum chassis built at Abbey Panels and a 289 Cu in 4.7-liter engine. The model was more of an experimental design, built for testing several R&D improvements originating from Carcraft, Shelby, and McLaren. The car went on to win the 12 Hours of Sebring in 1966. It was a one-off and was later destroyed following orders from United States Customs officials. Mark II model. Exploiting intra-company competition, Ford got both Holman Moody and Shelby American to build the Mark II, and it is the most successful car in the GT40 model series. Like we mentioned earlier, the Mark III was similar to the Mark I, but was built to perform well with the Ford Galaxy's 7-liter 427Ci FE engine. With the exception of the chassis, Holman Moody redesigned the car to accommodate the larger and heavier 427 engine. In 1966, the 3 teams racing the Mark II shocked European audiences by beating Ferrari and finishing 1-2-3 in the standings. The Ford GT40 went on to win the race for the next 3 years. Mark III model. The Mark III, unlike its siblings, was a road car only, and only 7 were built. It had 4 headlamps, a 4.7-liter engine detuned to 228 kilowatts, and softened shock absorbers. The shift lever was moved to the center, an ashtray was added, and the car was available with the steering wheel on the left side of the car. Unfortunately, the Mark III was unpopular with customers who often choose the Mark I over it. J-Car and Mark IV. The J-Car was born out of an effort to develop a car with better aerodynamics. The original Mark I Mark II chassis was abandoned, and everything was redesigned besides the 7-liter engine. The car was designated as the J-Car, as it was constructed to meet the Appendix J regulations introduced in 1966 by FIA. However, it was scrapped after testing resulted in the death of its driver, Ken Miles. The Mark IV was the most radical and American variant of all the GT40s over the years. It was built around a reinforced J chassis powered by the same 7-liter engine as the Mark II. Although it incorporated some components of the Mark II, the Mark IV was totally different from other GT40s. Learning from Miles's accident, safety components like a NASCAR-style steel tube roll cage were included. The Mark IV ran in only 2 races, the April 1967 12 Hours of Sebring and the June 1967 24 Hours of Le Mans, and won both events. The name GT40 is abbreviation for Grand Touring 40. The number 40 represents the vehicle's height of 40 inches measured at the windscreen. The measurement was a modification made by Roy Lunn to the preliminary design. Although the GT40 has become one of the most iconic racing cars in history, its biggest moment, the 1996 Le Mans, ended with a controversial finish. With the win assured for Ford, having gotten its cars in the top 3 positions, the question became which of the teams should cross the finish line first. Would it be Ken Miles, Denny Hume, or Bruce McLaren, or Chris Amon? Ford officials chose to make it a tie, but when Automobile Club de l'Ouest, ACO, organizers of the Le Mans event, informed them that a tie would not be possible, they became cut in a clash. Should they give the first place to McLaren, who had been easy to work with, or Ken Miles, who had contributed more to the project? There are speculations on what decision was made and what happened in those final seconds, but in the end, McLaren was declared the winner. Neither driver had many opportunities to say what had really happened. Both died testing new race cars, Miles in 1966 and McLaren in 1970. Their deaths were tragedies that soured Ford's success. Nonetheless, the Ford GT40 is recognized as an American pioneer in European classic racing. In 2018, a Mark II sold by R.M. Sotheby's for $9,795,000. The car had won third overall at the 1966 Le Mans 24 Hours, and the purchase is the highest price achieved for a GT40 at auction. It was a marker of the legendary status the model series had earned. Ford had beaten Ferrari. This is where we draw the curtains on today's video. Thank you for staying with us. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with us. Thanks again for watching. See you in the next video.